Hi there, Karen Lovely here, the podcast, The Power of Self-Evolution. It is super early in the morning, and I'm excited to have an extraordinary guest. But before I introduce him, I want to talk about something that I had no idea in myself that went undiagnosed through many therapists and professionals is depression. I had depression my entire life, almost as a baby. We don't say almost. I had symptoms and signs of depression as an infant, and I had no idea that this was the case until I started my own journey into transformation and evolving my inner self. And as I look back, I think, oh my gosh, depression, and according to suicide.org, misdiagnosed, undiagnosed depression is the number one cause of suicide. And I also come from suicidal tendencies. That death card was always in my hip pocket. Even as a child, I thought, wow, life seems so hard and difficult. I'm always unhappy, and I don't get that we work, we live unhappily, and then we die. That was 9-10 years old. I thought that, and I thought, well, death seems, since it's inevitable, that would actually be the best option. And I often thought that, especially at my hardest times in high school and when I was questioning my life. So as I have been delving into my own psyche and understanding myself, what I put together in my own mind, didn't study it, didn't read it, there was this deep, profound sense of hopelessness. Hopelessness, I believe, is really the root of depression. And which then I say that to say that depression then is a symptom. This is purely my point of view from my own experiences. Depression is symptomatic of severe hopelessness, this absolute sense of there's no hope. And then, coupled with that, this sense of complete helplessness, aloneness, and no one to turn to. So that said, this morning, I am so honored to have another human being who has an extraordinary story of his own bout with depression and mental health issues. And I want to introduce Mark Hattas. Good morning, Mark. How are you?
Oh, great. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning. Now, you are the co-founder of the RUCA Group, which is a personal and organizational transformational company. That is your for-profit company. And so you have this business side, this corporate side, this wonderful part of your life that is business, and then you also have an even more extraordinary mission, which I love, and you are also one of the founding members of journeysdream.org, your nonprofit, and that is all about connecting those touched by mental health challenges with programs and resources that support renewed hope and well-being. Woo! Yippee! I love it. Yes. So we're going to get into that in a moment, but the biggest thing about you was your own mental health challenges, quote-unquote mental illness diagnosis, and your personal story. Would you please tell us about that, and of course your darkest moment that had you have your most awakened, profound catharsis, if you will?
Sure, absolutely. And thanks for having me. It's such a thrill to be here with you. And Journey's Dream is something that's near and dear to my heart because after I came through, one of the things that became very clear is there's so much out there that is against people healing, it seems. And there's so much out there that's for people healing. And so when I was going through my struggle, it was a real dynamic challenge that I'm going to reveal in just a few minutes, but it's something that every single person on the planet, we believe, can find full recovery. It doesn't mean that it's going to be the same for everybody, but it's there. So let's begin with that story part. I had sold a very successful software company. We did custom product development. In fact, it still exists, but I sold it in 2010 after 12 years of building it. And there was this moment of transformation even before that, because I had reached a crossroads and found myself in tears in the parking garage looking for some guidance. And it was about a month after that, maybe a month and a half after that, the whole company was sold, my portion. So 9 months later, I found myself diagnosed with a mental health challenge, bipolar 1 disorder. And leading up to that, it was bliss, honestly. It was, I was experiencing things that I had only read about from ancient mystics. And here I was going through it on cloud 9 and telling people about it and how excited I was. And Karen, I'd be in rooms where there'd be a business meeting and we would be talking about something and the room would fill with an aroma. And then we'd shift to another topic and it would fill with that aroma. And other kinds of unusual experiences. So it was beyond me that I was, quote unquote, mentally ill. I was having what I would probably today look at more like a spiritual awakening. And yet there was also this flavor as the week had gone on of tremendous fear. As I started to share it with people and people would reflect to me that, Mark, something's wrong. It went from, hey, you might want to go and talk to somebody, to you might be possessed by a devil. And, you know, depending on where they were coming from. And at the time, Karen, I was a total people pleaser. I wanted people to like me, and I wasn't being liked. So all of my anxieties were coming up, and it became this internal battle of Armageddon, if you will.
Yeah.
And as that progressed, it became clear to my wife that I wasn't navigating very well, and they called the paramedics. There was another gentleman friend who had come over to help me. And so there was this, okay, you're going. And when I sat in that room at the psych ward, I was just confused. And I had, you know, ups and downs in life. And this was a moment of, how could this happen? You know, where did I go wrong? And because it was so good. And I was kind of thinking, oh, this is my moment where I heard about instantaneous, miraculous transformations, enlightenment, that kind of thing. And I thought, oh, this is my path to enlightenment. You know, it'll happen this week. It's, you know, the naivety of the situation. But I did get enlightened that day. You know, those days. The days before the hospital, and then in the days that followed, I became really clear that all my judgments about people who had a mental illness were being touched upon, as I was now the one that was being talked about as being mentally ill. And it doesn't feel good to have someone put a label that is associated with an illness when it didn't resonate with me, that was what was going on. But that's what I went through, and that was hard. That was really, really hard. So for 3 years, I went in and out of psychosis, essentially, you know, through these manias, these ups and downs. And I'll tell you what, after the hospital stay, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get back on my feet. But yet the doctor told me I'd never get well. I'd be on meds the rest of my life. My wife was scared. We've got 5 children. And it was a big question, like, what's going to really happen with our lives? And there are these tense moments. There were moments where I wanted to leave, Liz wanted to leave, my wife, and we didn't know how this was all going to work out. And it was 3 of the most interesting years of my life, I would say. Challenging is an understatement.
Yeah.
And it was in 2014. I thought I'd found a pathway to kind of break free, because I always had this concept of there's light at the end of this. There's something that it's like there's this cloud and it's going to break and the sun's going to shine and I'm going to get through to the other side. And so I took a trip in the early 2014 and actually went out to a place where I was away from people who were judging me, and I was in an environment that felt safe. And I went fully into my mania, thinking, okay, I'm going to go into the mania and I'm going to come out the other side, almost like, you know, a train busting through a wall or something. And I just surrendered. And as I was in it, I was with some friends, and we thought, you know, that we had our own thoughts, but in hindsight, as we talked later, it's like, well, I thought I'll go and do this. They kind of knew I was in mania, and they thought that they could support me. And it was interesting because it got to a level where it was beyond what they felt comfortable with. And I remember my wife calling. She knew right away something wasn't right. She's like, look, you need to come home. And my parents actually drove from Chicago to Michigan, and we met, you know, because my friend drove me to them, so we met kind of halfway. And I remember exchanging. I got out of his car into my mother's car, and full-blown mania, talking about becoming president of the United States and, you know, all kinds of grandiose ideas. And she just placated me the whole way, talking. And we get to near my hometown, and I realize she's not driving to my home. And I'm like, Mom, where are you going? And we pull into the mental hospital which I had previously been to. And I'm like, wait a minute, what are you doing? So we met Liz. So it's my mom, my dad, my wife. We're pulling in. I'm sitting in the car, realizing my closest friends, my parents, and my wife, in my perspective, it's not necessarily the truth, right? In my perspective, I was betrayed.
Wow.
And it was the ultimate betrayal because I was trying to surrender into a transformative process, and they wanted to go medicate me again in a way that didn't feel good. You know, not that you know, medication's good, by the way. You know, it's really good for so many circumstances. It's just that was my frame of mind. I felt betrayed, and I didn't want to go back. So I started being funny, actually, trying to, telling jokes. And, you know, I'm in my mania, and in mania, there's many skills that start to come to people that I started to discover. They're skills of mine, but, you know, I had suppressed them, and they would start to come out. So I was singing songs and telling jokes, and it was kind of fun until I had to go. And I remember crying, begging my wife not to do this. Like, almost like, you're doing this to me. You're betraying me. Not a easy thing for her either.
No.
So I get in the hospital. I'm sitting in this chair, bewildered, feeling these energies of betrayal.
Yeah.
Surrounded by people that I know are beautiful human beings, you know, because I'm with the other patients and the staff there. They're amazing. But just this emptiness. And there's terror. Because I, in full mania, had an experience. One of my biggest fears was a concept I'd seen in the movies called possession. And I'm wrapping up the story here. But in possession, I had seen in the movies how there's like this quote-unquote devil and these quote-unquote possessed people, and they and not to say there's not people who portray possession in a really powerful way, but it was just a terror that someone was going to take my soul and damn me to hell. You know, and it goes back to a lot of the early stories that I'd heard as a kid. Not that that was how I was raised. It's just I heard those stories like, oh my gosh, what if that's true? What if that's true? What if that's true? And I wanted to know, what's the truth? What's the truth? What's the truth? So one night, this gets to my lowest moment. I'm in the hospital. I'm in the bed. Might have been night 1 or 2. And this voice keeps circling in my head again and again and again about possession. And I start to see what my perception is of timelines. And I start to see, okay, if I make this choice, and I'd see like 400 choices that go, and I see where it ends. And it kept ending with me dying. And some of them ended with me either dying in like this blaze of glory or something like that. And there was this terror of this possession idea that what if what I'm being possessed with is evil? What if it's going to cause me to take an action against somebody or my family? And I said, F it. I went out to the hallway, and there was a nurse there. She was pushing a cart. It was 3 a.m. or something. No one else was around. And I said, hey, I just need to do something. I strip all my clothes off, run down the hall. And, of course, now there are people coming to help. And they grab me and they rush me into this kind of private room. And they bring in a gentleman. He's talking to me. And, you know, very lovingly. And I'm standing there buck naked. And I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gonna drug me, and then I'm still gonna be afraid, and I'm tired of being who it is I am, you know, and I wanted to be fixed, if you will. And I lifted my body off the ground and smashed my head on the ground, trying to just crush my skull. And I figured if I could end this life, then I could save other people from me.
Wow. Ugh. Unbelievable. Mark, are you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I lost you because you're in Chicago. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes. West of Chicago.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just thought, oh no, did you just cut out that moment? It's like I'm listening, and I've heard bits and pieces of the story when we met, but as you're speaking, there are parts of it that I so can relate to. But it just was such like almost a deep pain to my heart and soul when you said, if I could end my life, right, then I could save others from me. That's like, wow. Oh my God.
Well, and it's, you know, I'll tell you what, and I, by the way, now am healthy. Per a doctor, I'm off all medications, and for the last 3 years, actually. And it took, though, that was 2014 that happened. Today's end of 2017. That was early 2014. So it's been a few years, and it was not long after that I fired my doctor.
Yeah.
And he was shocked. And he's like, well, why? And I said, well, you don't believe I can get well, and I do. Because I still did. Because when I left that hospital and I was in outpatient, I, you know, and by that time, it's like my wife and I had a lot of repair. We didn't know what was going to happen. You know, she had thrown out the word divorce a few times, and it's like, finally I said, honey, I know you didn't sign up for this. If you want out, take whatever you want, and let's make this smooth. And because I made a commitment for life. I didn't say this to her, but I made a commitment for life, and I knew she did too, But divorce for me, it's not a light word. It's like, we made a commitment to each other, but I recognize this is very different. Mm-hmm. So, let's see the realities of the situation. I just wanted her to be happy, and there was so much unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you what, now, today,
mm-hmm.
life is totally different.
Yeah.
Our relationship is healthy,
mm-hmm.
and it's been a challenge
mm-hmm.
In a huge, huge way, especially, I had to look within me, at what I did to create the dynamics of setting up the quote-unquote betrayal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't betraying me, they were loving me. It's just, I had a skewed perception.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't being possessed by anything outside of me. I was being overtaken by a joyous love within me.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to fully be embraced by that joy, by that love, it was kind of a transformative process that I was going through to shed
mm-hmm.
all of these darknesses and these belief systems that were frankly not serving me.
Right, that's an understatement. So I want to go back and recap. I have some questions. So by that time, you had 5 kids and a wife, that you married. So how long were you married by this point? How many years when this happened?
We were married in 96. So I was 18. Well, yeah, 15 to 18 years. 15 years when it started.
Right. So this is your long-term love and wife of and mother of 5 of your children at this point.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting, too. We have to, before this, you created a highly successful, thriving company.
Yes.
Yes. And software. And it was so successful, and then you sold it. It was after selling it, you say about 9 months, just to recap, right? 9 months, and in that time, you deteriorated. And it's amazing in looking backwards how highly functioning you were in the realm of just survival and being a human in life, providing for your family, married, right? There's all this. And then the flip side, it's almost like, did you see, in retrospect, any of the signs in that time prior to this?
There were, and, by the way, I would have been seen as pretty functional up until the moments that I was taken to the hospital by everyone.
Oh.
And I even felt very functional up until that last week where I was kind of, in hindsight, experiencing an awakening
mm-hmm.
that was so rapid, and then I got hungry for it and chased it,
mm-hmm.
and I chased it kind of right into that battle,
mm-hmm.
where is it that I am and where is it that I was, and that, conflict. But I have been told, I don't know if this is necessarily the case, but back in January of that year, this would have been 2011,
mm-hmm.
I was skiing, just a little ski hill, and, just 38 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids were out there, and there's these ramps, and these young kids, flipping around and doing all kinds of stuff. And I go, and I'm like, I'm going to do this jump, and I just go full force. And I had skied a lot, but I'd never gone up jumps. So I didn't know how to do it. But I just was determined.
Mm-hmm.
It was this interesting dynamic, and I go off this pretty big jump, and my body, instead of leaning kind of forward and landing well on my knees with the cushion,
mm-hmm.
I started to fall backwards. and I landed full force with my back, really full back, and it was
God.
one of the biggest pains that I'd ever experienced in my life. And I managed to hobble on the skis for a little bit until, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I remember shortly after that, I started to become really sensitive to electronics. And someone had bought me a new phone. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I'm so excited. It was the latest and greatest phone. And I hold it, I put it up to my ear. And I suddenly feel this electrical shock, almost like this energy coming from the phone through my arm until I could hardly speak. My tongue was, being almost like it was filled and my mouth couldn't open. And I put the phone down, like, what the heck is that? And then it started to subside. Like, that was interesting. So I picked the phone back up and it comes back. And it was it was a phone that was defective, the iPhone 4. Remember they put the antenna on the outside?
Oh, I don't have any iPhones. I'm sorry, Android.
I don't either. But
okay.
After that, I'm like, I'm not touching it.
Oh.
It had nothing to do, I'm sure, with the iPhone. It was just that particular phone on that day, following that accident. And it kicked off and then it became psychosomatic, I think, where I just became nervous about what was happening. And that happened. And on my way to Israel, I remember getting, like, I was going to be going through airport security and all this, and I bought these, I don't know if they're not lead line, but they're electrostatic clothing that I was wearing. I was wearing this hoodie going to Israel.
Oh, wow.
With electrostatic because I was so nervous, because any electronics I started to be around, I started to kind of get this tension. And so that happened, and by the time I got back from Israel, which was a magical trip, it kind of subsided. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm on the other side of this. So that's the only unusual thing that could have kind of been a catalyst for some of this. But the truth is that's just an outward symptom of something that was really happening outside and inside, through all aspects. So the whole being really needed to be helped through this. But otherwise, it was just normal life.
Yeah, okay, so that's amazing how highly functioning we can be. Because again, I can relate. This is why I went, I was a kid who said, I want therapy. And I'd been in and out of therapy my whole life. And I knew, like you saying, like you knew something more. That you could see beyond all of what you were dealing with in your circumstances. Like I knew something way outside of what was happening. And yet, because I was so high functioning, nobody saw it. Or if anybody did, nobody said anything. And then I had to figure it out for myself, but I was able to disguise it or hide from it for decades because I was a classic from 6 years old, a classic overachiever and perfectionist. And that was my self-defense coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So I was able to hide behind being a super overachiever and highly driven and ambitious from a very early age, especially almost in a weird way. That's another thing. It was something that if I looked back and I was my mother, I'm 7 years old, I negotiate my own horseback riding lessons. I trespass onto the neighbor's estate by myself at 7, hang out there at the barn. It's a private estate, but I didn't care. And so I would go over there and finally had the courage. And I was a child who never spoke, but I had the courage to ask the teacher if I could take lessons. So I run back home. It's like a Peanuts, cartoon thing. I run back home and I go, Mom, can I take horseback? And I just remember, wah, 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 wah. And she's like, how much is it? I run back. How much is it? I run back. $25. She's like, okay. She never comes to the barn. Never. She never even assesses the situation. She never even looks to see if there are any horses there. It was just surreal. And then, but I showed up, Mark, every week like clockwork from 7 to 12 years old on my own. No one ever had to say, Karen, go to horseback riding lessons and do this. Because I teach kids today. I empower kids through horses today. And never. So I was already showing signs of being highly driven and self-generating. I would have said as my mom, well, that's interesting, but I got nothing. Like it was just amazing. And what I want to go to, Mark, is here you are, this highly successful, businessman, corporate man, and family man, husband, right? And a really awesome husband, father of 5 kids. You show signs of delusions of grandeur and, mania, and they go right to almost tricking you to drive you to the psych ward, to the mental hospital, right? Like what happened to all that other stuff, and then here you are, so I can understand that. But there's a great quote that I love, and the quote is, people fear what they don't understand. And I actually got that from, CBS's show Scorpion. But that's based on a genius's life, whom I've had the privilege to hear speak in person. But anyway, bingo. Now, and you talked about the ultimate betrayal, right? Now, I want, in this whole time, again, looking backwards, you say that, and I'm asking, you knew that there was something greater, that you didn't need the medication. You could see that outside of yourself. I don't know how to describe it but I'm saying it that way for listeners, who can relate to this, because that's what this is about. Transforming and evolving other human beings through your experience, through my experience, is very powerful, right? So can you say that as you're going through this, there was something you knew or saw that completely resonated with you, was your truth and made sense to you about, number one, not needing the medication, right? And that there was something you knew about yourself that people didn't understand or couldn't see or comprehend. Did you have that experience?
Well, and I think I'm guessing that at some level, anyone who goes through these kinds of challenges, there's an element of feeling misunderstood.
Yes.
There's an element of, no one else can understand, and it's a unique experience. Mm-hmm. And I think what's coming out, because, the power of people sharing these stories, mm-hmm. is that you're not alone.
That's
and
right.
You know what? As much as we want to be special and we want to be unique, mm-hmm. and we are, mm-hmm. this is not a unique process. And exactly. It's not abnormal.
Exactly.
To go through it in this day and age.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's what my hindsight experience is of what health and well-being really is. Someone who's truly healthy fully has conscious awareness of who it is that they are. Mm-hmm. Why they are here can change. Because at 4 years old, why you're here, mm-hmm. is going to have a certain idea structure, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not going to be able to communicate or convey necessarily the same words that a 40-year-old is going to be able to convey.
Right.
And so over time, we are illuminated as people as to why we're here. But if we hang on to why we're here as a 4-year-old at 40, there's going to be some dysfunction in that person's life. Exactly. Because they haven't allowed for their purpose to evolve. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I discovered through the process is that one of the biggest reasons for divisions within our soul is that we don't allow for the softening and for the being molded by that force that's greater than us. That force that, for me, I call that my loving father, my loving mom, who is not my physical mom, but more that divine mother. And that holiness, which is really to be, of one, is what I had been brought to become aware of. And the full immersion in it, the full softening of me as a human being such that I could become what it is that I am today, knowing that I'm going to continue to put forth into the world that which began within whatever beginning there was, right? Call the beginning. Because we know not what a thing is really. We just try to put labels and words on things, and we want to understand. But the greatest breakthrough I had was in surrendering who it is that I thought I was. And think about the dynamic of really being like you said, a father, a husband, a business leader. I mean, I was honored for some cool things that are, again, just labels, but, the world put a lot of emphasis on, entrepreneurs, which I really valued, being an entrepreneur, and getting accolades for that, which we did as an organization, and one of them I did individually. It's like, wow, that felt really good. My ego was flying high. Selling the company, all of a sudden, all those things just kind of slipped away. I was no longer an entrepreneur. I was no longer, being heralded as one of the great leaders. And not that a lot of people did that, by the way. I mostly did that in my head. But,
right, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
But all that identity, it just went away.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to a psychologist who said, in his experience, and he didn't have a scientific study, by the way, but in his experience, he said, a third of the people diagnosed with bipolar are entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And a big clash happens when we disconnect from the fantasy. I mean, think of an entrepreneur. They're holding a vision of a future outcome that they can see oftentimes beyond anybody else that's around them. And they're living as if the vision's already a reality, and guiding and putting forth this idea, planting it in the heads of others such that that vision can be collectively produced. And what mistake most entrepreneurs who end up with bipolar, I think, make is they get confused between what's the vision and what's today. And then I got called on it even by people around me who would say, Mark, that's not happening. That's not how our company is. We're pretty fragile right now. I'm like, yeah, but don't live in what you see. Live into this future and let's create it. But that was flawed thinking as an entrepreneur. What I started to realize now is I can see the vision and I can experience emotionally the vision being realized, and I can be fully present in the actuality of what is being manifest today and bridge the gap. And that's a healthy entrepreneur.
Exactly.
Where I can be fully present here, yet realize that in my experience, I have released that fantasy world. But I hadn't done that before, having gone through it. So I think there's a big opportunity to teach leaders in this world, whether they're out on their own building a company or internally feeling like an entrepreneur, like building something, or any CEO who's got to put a vision out there and really, live into that. There's a healthy boundary that allows for the individual to experience the future today and also live fully present in today. And if
Yes.
that can be done, then we can stop some of the highs and lows, because you hear, some really big-time entrepreneurs who, in their brilliance, in their genius, they are exceptional. And yet they will tell you that they have way big highs and way big lows. And when those start to soften and we realize that we don't need the highs and the lows in order to have the genius,
that's right.
That's a big breakthrough. And too often people hang on to the idea that, well, I don't want to change anything because I got this genius, right? So maybe that's just goes along with genius. It's like, well, maybe, and maybe if we step further into that, we can allow for those belief systems to soften, and we can actually fully live into our genius without all the manias and depressions.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had many people say to me, yeah, Karen, I don't know. I'm afraid. Highly successful. I mean, we're talking like geniuses in their own right, humans making $1 million a month, and on track to be a billionaire. Not even a problem. It has to do nothing. But he was so attached to having it happen on a particular date. These type of people will say, well, but Karen, I'll lose my edge. And that's what I feel you're saying, that they think they're going to lose something. And that was me, Mark. Like, look, I can talk about other people, but as you're speaking, I would have diagnosed me. I had absolute mild symptoms of bipolarism. No question. I see it. I also have an older sister, 15 years older than me, and she, as a child, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And intuitively, I knew they were wrong. The doctors were wrong. My mother was wrong. My mother would say, oh, yeah, but she has schizophrenia. And I said, she was diagnosed. I said, no, she does not. And now she was estranged from our family. She left home. I never saw her again. I was about 1 year old. And I was so distraught. I remember clear as day her leaving. And I remember saying to myself, how can she leave me? Doesn't she love me? And then in my process, I actually went back and found her and reconnected to her. It was profound.
Oh,
yeah, it was like so profound. Actually bawling my eyes out, share that story with her and talk about the eternal like mind F you, when I shared that with her, she said, oh my God, I remember seeing you standing there. And she said to herself, I wish I could take you with me. And she actually said, I immediately went and got pregnant to replace you.
Oh
my God. That was so like cathartically profound, like beyond belief, so healing for me. But what I knew, let's go back to today. I asked her about the schizophrenia and she says, no, I don't have that. And I knew she never did. Now, I was a child, but I intuitively knew. And I also know, Mark, that most people are misdiagnosed, wrongly diagnosed, like so far off diagnosed, I don't even know what the term would be, that, because of these labels, that just like you, I had similar experiences, was able to heal it holistically by understanding myself and my psyche and my ego and the disconnect of my conscious mind and my subconscious mind. And I really now focus on the unconscious mind, which is so exciting. But to say that we can heal this, and yet we have so many people that don't have the ability for whatever reasons to actually see this at such a deep, profound level, that it still goes in general. The medications, that only treat the symptoms is, I've always felt so different. I could see things just like you're talking about. But I didn't have agreement. Like nobody could see it and understand it. So that's where it feeds into. Nobody gets me. No one understands what I'm going through. I have no one to turn to, which exacerbates the symptoms. and puts us in this, what I call this wicked vortex. And that's what I hear you saying as it relates to just me and my story. And how do we then let people know, which is why we're doing this podcast, Mark, that there are other way more powerful healing modalities and techniques, and we don't have to rely on that medication. So let's talk about that for a moment. You went back and said, I don't want any more medication. That was, what was that? How did you know that? Or, give me a little background on, because you had mentioned that you didn't want to, about the medication.
Well, and just to be clear, for me, so labels are labels, right? And I don't agree with everything you were just sharing on the diagnoses, that, because you mentioned that most people are diagnosed properly. I don't know that. My experience is, for example, if someone were to say I was bipolar and then they showed me a list of the symptoms that are associated with their definition of bipolar, it's like, yep, I had all that. I was in a bathroom where walls were moving. And most people would call that a hallucination, and I called it a miracle. But in the definition that they use, it's like, yep, they would put that. I had, if you have too much, like, there's a religious element that they look at. If you're talking to God and you're doing different things, they put that in the category of, yep, that's a bipolar symptom. So they have these symptoms. So in their symptoms, it's like if you called someone a jerk, and you have a definition of what a jerk is, you then would put that label on someone who is going to reflect to you your definition set of a jerk. That's all that's happening. The challenge is my view is that all those things are part of a transformation process, not an illness. Now,
right.
An illness to me is kind of like, I think of an old person who is at the end of their life and they have, some kind of illness, and then they pass. And it's like, that's an illness, right? I don't call a cough an illness either. It's like, it's cough. The body's trying to, get to a place of health and well-being. So why is it that someone exhibits these kinds of symptoms? And we can look chemically and say, well, there's a chemical, shift in these people. Their brain is operating differently. It's like, well, of course it is. But what's the cause? And that's why I wanted to find a solution, because I knew in my heart, when I came home from the hospital, and about a month later, I think I shared this story with you before, I had an experience that led me to kind of a breakdown, where I just said, okay, I don't know what to do here. I feel I could get well. I'm told I cannot. I'm a spiritual man, and I said, God, if there's a way to heal this, show me the way. And Karen, in that moment, it was about not even a split second. It was instantly. As soon as I asked, my hand lifted off my lap and reached over and grabbed one of about 20 books that was at the side of my bed. And I lifted it up, and the book, I would say it opened. I was looking down, my hands were opening it, but it was as if I wasn't opening it. And I'm just watching. I'm like a witness watching my own body open this book. And it opens to this page, and it's a book about the life of this mystic. She's a 16th century mystic named Teresa, and she was a Catholic saint. And I'm reading about her story on this one page. I opened to the perfect page, right? And it's talking about her experiences, and I start laughing, realizing, oh my gosh, she had the same kinds of experiences I had, and she was a Catholic mystic.
Yep.
And so it was the answer to my prayer. And I also said, I surrender such that if there is such a way to heal, I will just continue to surrender, surrender, surrender. And I prayed that this could be used for something good.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a breadcrumb trail, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just continuously confirming that I can be well, I can be well, I can be well. And I was surrounded by people who told me, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. And even if I told someone,
Mm-hmm.
if it was in my close circle or my doctor,
Mm-hmm.
they would kind of say, yeah, that's part of the bipolar symptoms, that you think you can get well. I'm like, are you crazy? No, it's not. How about let's support people who have that belief. Let's support that there's a possibility that people can get well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was less about getting off anything, and it was more about getting into a belief system that allowed for
Mm-hmm.
healing. No person can heal any other person,
right,
other than the one person who desires for that health and well-being to receive a healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, can you make the grass grow? No, but you can
Mm-hmm.
plant the seed and allow the grass to grow. So I would say I was healed because I allowed the healing. And the medicine, what it does is it does create a suppressive barrier
Mm-hmm.
for the deep integrative healings that will come. It's like no different, though, than drinking, alcohol to suppress, a painful situation, because the person drinking the alcohol doesn't have the skills or the teachings to really allow for that deep wound that could be ancient from coming up. Or someone who self-medicates, with heroin
Mm-hmm.
or some other drug, it's like, what are they self-medicating for?
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want to feel and face some of the trauma and the pain and the hurt and the betrayal and the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what if we had tools that supported people going deep within to allow for their own self-preservation to release and allow for something greater to come in and help bring them back into a restored state? And when we can be brought back into a restored state, in whatever word we want to use, it could just be love, right?
Mm-hmm.
God is love.
Mm-hmm.
Be brought back into union with love, true love, not what we, bastardize love in the world with all these goofy things in the movies and concepts that we teach. It's like pure love, the perfect love, Christ love, the love of, whatever faith background that you have or don't have. It's the essence of life that allows the trees to grow and allows for human beings to be here and allows for the sun to shine and allows for all this, the air to be there and that breath. It's that which allows for us to say yes. And in that, I was trusting. And that led me step by step to doctors, by the way, because it wasn't just I sat in a room in a cave.
Mm-hmm.
But Karen, once I fired my doctor, it was my testament to the world that says, I truly believe, because doctors were kind of on a pedestal for me. I truly believe I can heal, and this guy doesn't. And I found doctors who did, and they helped me heal the body. So I had someone help me transform the gut. I had another doctor help me get the right nutrients for my body so that my body could really start to remove some of the imbalances of the ratios of things that it needed. Because if the body doesn't get what it needs, you will try to get it from another source.
Right.
If my body needed, some, lithium, and it didn't have it, it might try to get it from somewhere that doesn't have it to give.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden there's an imbalance created, and all it needed was a little bit of lithium, which you can get over the counter, lithium orotate. It's like, well, let's get the body the lithium. I needed vitamin B well beyond what my vitamin B intake was, and other vitamins. So just over-the-counter stuff, which I still take every day, over-the-counter stuff. I don't take any prescription psychotropic medications, though I'm glad that they exist, because if they didn't, I don't know what the outcome would have been.
Right. And, I want to go back. I'm glad we can agree to disagree. I have my perceptions and my thoughts, and then, not the actual scientific studies, but I have my own case studies, and I have myself, right? So I love that we have our different points of view, right? Because not everyone's going to relate to everything you say. Not everyone's going to relate to everything I say. But
Right.
to just be able to hear each other and respect their points of view. I still stand in, I absolutely believe that a lot of mental illness is not at all mental illness. It's just a disconnect or a miss or unalignment from the conscious to the subconscious to the unconscious. But that's a simple thing. Another podcast for another
but Karen,
day.
I'm in agreement. That's all it is. All it is division within our being.
Great. Yeah. And
all I was saying with the label is, I was acknowledging. So let's say a psychiatrist listens to this.
yes.
All right.
I hope they do.
Yeah. To the psychiatrist, it's like, I was just acknowledging that, hey, they have a DSM number 5 or whatever they have with different things, and they look at that to determine what drug to give.
Yeah.
Because that's the world we're living in today.
Right.
But no drug ever healed anybody.
Exactly.
But what the drugs do, they're doing their job, and they're good people. They're doing their job.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to see happen in the world of psychiatry is a softening into the idea structure that, you know what, maybe it's possible that all people can move through this. There was a nun that I heard recently, and I guess she's passed, but she had said that if all people knew God, was her perspective,
Yes.
there wouldn't be a mental illness.
Yes.
And guess what? She was a psychiatrist as well.
Wow.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
And she discovered
Love it.
that. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, and God has different forms. People call it the universe, love, all kinds of things. It's just that source of creation. If we knew union with that, if a tree that is designed to create apples thought it was a pear tree, it would probably be called bipolar. It's like, no, you're not a pear tree, you're an apple tree. You'll be who you are.
Right.
And so that's often what happens with people, is they try to please ideas that they have, and
Exactly.
they have beliefs that divide them. It's like, no, shed those and release the judgments and get back to the whole beingness. And the number one thing I'll share, these doctors helped a lot. The number one thing that supported my health and well-being, it was actually something that in my Catholic faith I grew up not having an understanding of, but the Beatitudes are actual core teachings that are orderly and perfect to support healing, because they allow for that union. They allow for the letting go of the rigidity that we've held on to, and they allow for a softening such that those hurts and pains and shames can come up and be released. And behind that is always love. It's always this inspired wisdom that comes. And slowly, as I start to, and we teach it now, these Beatitudes, as you know, Dave Austin and I are putting a program together that's close to being done. It's all recorded, and I believe that as people get in touch with these, in conjunction with other care, but this is a big part of it, we've got to allow the spirit to heal and come back together, and then the wisdom will come in the individual to know where to go, what to do. And it could be going to get a massage, and it could be going and seeing a therapist, and it could be going and, whatever it is that they're inspired to do, but they'll be inspired from that knowingness that they're coming back into a whole relationship. And that's going to be something that hopefully many, many people can get their hands on. And as they go through whatever treatments they're going through, if they can get their hands on this, I think that there's going to be a lot more health and well-being belief
Absolutely.
structure that
Absolutely.
starts to form on this planet, and we can change this vicious cycle, which
Yes.
is growing.
Mm-hmm.
450 million people right now diagnosed with a mental or neurological disorder. We can change that.
Yes, and that's sorry, say that again, because is that in the U.S. or is that worldwide?
That's worldwide.
Okay, say it again so the listeners can hear that.
Yeah, 450 million people
Uh-huh.
right now
Uh-huh.
are diagnosed with a mental or neurological disorder on the planet.
Wow.
And I think the stat was something like 3/4 of the people don't get the care that they need. So we don't even know the real numbers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And
Okay.
if you look at the other stat that they have is 1 in 4 globally in their lifetime will experience a mental, emotional kind of neurological disorder that is the current stat. Now, I believe with some of the things and the innovations that are coming around the planet that we have an opportunity to see that dramatically reduce.
Yeah.
And that will save lives, because of those people, 800,000, they end their life every year on the planet.
So now we're on to suicide, right?
Well, and that's out of 16 plus million attempts.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So, and quite frankly, these numbers to me are low, but that's just my opinion, right? Because a lot don't even get tracked because they're not talking about it. Yeah.
Correct.
So these, right, are the minimum numbers. Okay, so how much more time do you have? Because time flies when we're having fun. I have a few more questions, but I know that, we're in this profound, in the zone vortex. So how many more minutes do you have, knowing that I have
It's early here, so
You're good?
We're good till we're complete.
Okay, great. So so what I'm hearing here, for me personally, from what you have shared so far, right, is that regardless of, because I'm not a label person. There's no boxes for me. The box doesn't exist. I do things on my terms, and I'm finally able to own that after all this work on myself since inception, is that I don't even believe in words. But that's a whole nother, like, this whole virtual reality thing is super high tech and like way out there. But what I do get is that it's about trusting, Mark. When I hear this, is like trust that inner knowing, or that voice, the positive voices that make us feel good and have hope for ourselves, regardless of what other people are saying or doing or thinking, and keep going with that. Where, from my point of view, there was something internally in you, even though your wife, your parents, right, were driving you to the psych ward, if you will, and dropping you off, you were still staying connected to that inner profound love, and everything that you want to call it, that means something to you, that resonated with you. Whatever labels we put or whatever words we use, what I'm hearing is wow, because I can relate to almost every single thing that you experienced to a certain degree or another, is that at some level you trusted yourself to keep going. You trusted that you no longer needed the medication, and it did have its place, and that you fired your doctor and then opened yourself up. And again, you used the word allow. So I'm hearing stay open. Just because a doctor or doctors or people, family, friends, everybody out there are saying things, stay true to thyself. Stay in that highest inner knowing that serves you is a lesson I'm hearing. What are your thoughts? That's what I'm getting from this conversation, personally.
The biggest opportunity that people have who are struggling with a mental health challenge is to let go of who it is they think they are, and reconnect with the true nature of who it is that they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to just let that rest for a minute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, letting go of who it is that we think we are,
mm-hmm.
or are supposed to be,
mm-hmm.
is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Because I lived my life trusting that, what I thought I was supposed to be, and living into what I thought people wanted me to be, and what I, that was my situation. And the opportunity is to let all that go
mm-hmm.
and reconnect with a source within that
mm-hmm.
is 100% trustworthy.
Yes.
100%. And when I discovered that path,
mm-hmm.
and it was like a dying, honestly. It was like
mm-hmm.
I was letting go of something that I had lived with my whole life.
Yes.
It's like, I'm letting my whoopee go kind of thing,
Yeah.
But my whoopee, I had identified my whoopee as me,
mm-hmm.
But that was my, mask, if
yep.
you will.
Yep.
And it was like the mask was being dismantled
mm-hmm.
In a way that was really, could even, if I were, and I'm not a doctor, but if I were working with someone today who was
mm-hmm.
struggling,
mm-hmm.
because of my experience, it's like Carl Jung. Carl
mm-hmm.
Jung went through the same kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the fathers of psychology, I think.
Absolutely, yes. Innovative, yes.
I don't know if they call him that, but I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I know what you mean.
He went through this stuff,
mm-hmm.
right? And
yep.
he was documenting it.
Yep.
And it's like brilliance.
Brilliant.
The opportunity
mm-hmm.
is exactly what we all have, and that's where that deep knowing comes from. It's like gravity.
Mm-hmm.
The true nature of who we are, that trust of self, that trust of knowing,
mm-hmm.
is it's available to everyone, but no one can obtain it by reaching out on a tree and plucking it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a surrender process.
Mm-hmm.
It's a letting go, allowing for that death process of the old parts of us,
mm-hmm.
and releasing connection and attachment
mm-hmm.
to this material world, which sounds, I know, kind of spiritual, but it's also just how it is. Like, if the caterpillar held on to being a caterpillar, it would suppress itself from forming into a butterfly.
Yes.
So it's the same idea. It's like the butterfly, if it didn't allow itself to change its behaviors, die of its old self,
mm-hmm.
it would try to crawl on the leaves instead of fly.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going through human metamorphosis.
Yes.
In fact, it's like, I call it the flight of the human.
Mm-hmm.
So the flight of the human is letting go of anything that suppresses our transformation, such that we can be transformed
mm-hmm.
moment to moment, breath to breath.
Mm-hmm.
And we will all go through it.
Mm.
Every human being has an opportunity. And if we drug it, it is not helping the transformation accelerate.
Right.
Unless we start to wean people off that.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't want to, as a society, wean people off it until we create a base of underlying skills so that people can navigate this transformation. But instead of calling it an illness, I would love to one day, I think one day we will wake up as a society and say, you know what? We used to call that mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a suppressed caterpillar who needed a little support and encouragement to go and allow for the chrysalis to be built.
Right.
Knowing that, hey, in the chrysalis,
mm-hmm.
and science has shown this, the caterpillar's body completely dissolves.
Wow.
So they're giving their whole life. And yet, in the essence of that goo
mm-hmm.
inside there, it's still the same caterpillar, mm-hmm. right? It's just changing shape and form, and then a new body's created with wings.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine the day that that butterfly comes out and realizes that there are lakes and streams and other flowers and other animals, and what a wonder to be able to float around in that beautiful wonderful world that it had no idea existed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is on the other side of this.
Yes.
That's what I experienced. I experienced gifts in me
Mm-hmm.
that I had suppressed and judged and didn't think I was good enough and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, it was like I had wings,
Yeah.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
And like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the world took on a different shape, a different color, and I started to see the good in people and the good in me. And instead of seeing the world as chaotic, all of a sudden the world transformed into orderly.
Mm-hmm.
So did the world become orderly, or did I have the eyes to see it as it actually was always?
Mm-hmm.
But through the lens that I had before, I was just judging it.
Mm-hmm.
And we could heal a lot on this planet if
Absolutely.
we just stopped suppressing who it is we truly are.
Yeah, I love that. And the butterfly, I just love the way you said that. Really even resonated more for me. Okay, so last big question before we get on to talking a little bit more about Journey Stream and what you're up to there. Let's talk about this betrayal you talked about when your family was driving you, to drop you off. Words of wisdom around that, because there is the pressure or the where we don't feel like anyone's seeing us, hearing us, getting us, understanding what we're going through. And then, it's like these, what do you call it? These interventions, where everyone circles around, the person walks in and, they do this whole thing. What would you say to people who might feel like they're isolated and there is a sense of betrayal by even their own loved ones, their own families, their own spouses? How to transform that from what you experienced that might help somebody today in a similar situation. Does that make sense? Yeah.
There were so many great gifts that I experienced, and that you, if you're going through this, will experience. And they don't all feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that the betrayal was my own betrayal of myself reflected to me in the world.
Beautiful.
So you're not going to experience anything in the world that you haven't first experienced internally.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's attacking, and you're upset,
mm-hmm.
then that upset isn't from the person, the upset's in you.
Yes.
And so what I did with betrayal,
mm-hmm.
it hurt.
Yes.
But it wasn't because my mom and dad and my wife chose to bring me to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
It was because I associated that with a memory of me denying the true beingness of me and choosing to try to attach to this false world, if you will,
mm-hmm.
right? This is all temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed me, so the betrayal was a gift.
Yeah.
It allowed me to heal inside by saying, I did betray me. And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm willing to release my judgments of me betraying me. And I'm willing to let go of the attachment of trying to fit in this world. And I'm willing to bring forth something like Journey's Dream that not everyone's going to love.
Right.
But it's from love, and it's something that's really going to help every single person who comes and chooses to go through their own transformation. Because this will be a support hub. And it isn't about the anger, the frustration, the fear, and this and this and this and this, and betrayal, and someone should have done this. That's all a story. The true nature is to come back into agreement and alignment, with love.
Yeah.
And if we can be in a situation like what I went through with my mom and dad and my wife bringing me to the hospital, and I can have a smile on my face and feel like, oh, you know what? I trust the world is orderly, and you wouldn't be doing this unless you thought it was something really good, and I could have love in my heart, even in the face of someone, turning me over, if you will, to, a hospital that I didn't really want to go to. Well, then I would look at it like, wow, what a good family I have. They care for me so deeply that they drove hundreds of miles to pick me up. And my mom then had to drive alone with me because they then had two cars because they had to drive my car.
Right. Alone
with me, someone who's essentially out of his mind from the world's perspective. And I was pretty out there at that moment. What a gift to have a mother and a father who loved and cared for me so much to do that.
Exactly.
And a wife that knew she wasn't in a position to do that. She needed help. So what a great opportunity for her to ask for help. And for her to have the boldness as a mother to say, hey, my husband needs some help right now. I mean, that's how I look at it today.
Beautiful.
Through the eyes of compassion. And thankfully, they gave me the care that they did. The hospital, great care. The doctor, despite having fired him later, a wonderful human being doing what he thinks is right. And I just had a deeper belief that there was a possibility for full recovery.
Yeah.
And the only one that had to have that belief, by the way, was me.
Yeah.
And if you have that belief, if you're going through something and you have that belief you can be well, trust that you will be. And also allow for patience. Allow for patience. Take your medication. And if you don't think your doctor believes you can get well, then go find one who does. Find people who are aligned with your belief system. Because otherwise, you'll be in a system in that particular doctor's mind that he wants you to be in or she wants you to be in. And that's okay too if that's the path you want to take. But if you truly believe, no, I believe in full recovery, then demand that the people around you start to align to that, and that'll allow you to transform into actually believing it. Because until you actually believe it, you will be going through the cycles that you're going through.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And, I love how you talk about allowing, surrendering, letting go, releasing attachments. And that's what really did it for me in my process from the caterpillar to the butterfly. Is I kept resisting. I was not allowing. I was not surrendering. I wasn't willing to let go because I was so caught up in what I had known and was too scared out of my mind. But I do believe it is counterintuitive. It's what worked for me, healing my body from fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and serious celiac disease holistically, through the power of understanding my psyche. How the conscious mind works and works against the subconscious and the unconscious. So this is so amazing, Mark. Such great information. So now let's talk about journeysdream.org and the amazing event you have coming up November 4th. You're putting together what you're calling, which I love, Soldiers of Hope. Did I get that right? Yes.
You got it right.
Yeah.
You got it right.
Soldiers of Hope event. And that's bringing hope and well-being to those struggling with mental health. So tell us about that. How do people get involved? What are your intentions? And give us the deets, if you will.
All right. November 4th at Soldier Field in Chicago. There is this room. It's the Midway room. It's this beautiful room, and you can actually, it's inside, but you can go out these glass doors, and you're right at the field.
Oh, wow.
Looking at the Jumbotron, and, it's pretty cool. So we will be there from 4 to 7 on November 4th. So if you know someone in Chicago, or if you can get to Chicago, we would love to see you there. And here's what's so cool. We're bringing practitioners together that believe in the vision of Journey's Dream. And this vision is that all people can have this joyous life. You know, they can really move through these things to that other side. So there's a guy, for example, his name's Dr. Lipoff, and he's doing stuff with PTSD that's incredible. That soldiers coming back who have his treatment, within 45 minutes, they go to their pre-PTSD state. And he can show, and he won't do this at the event, but he can show all the science behind it and stuff. He's testified before Congress, and thousands of soldiers have gone through this practice.
Wow.
He'll be there talking about this and helping support hope for people. And there's others too. Like we'll have other practitioners, but we also have, you know, some pretty famous folks that are out there. We've got some celebs and we've got we're talking with some athletes that will be joining us as well.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a good time. We're going to listen to how Elvis's brother, he'll be there, found Elvis, and how that inspired him to support transformation with the opioid epidemic. And he has a new book out. We'll also have an ex-con there who was addicted to heroin and is now one of the biggest advocates for treatment. You know, and there's a huge movement to start to reduce the use of opioids, even from doctors, and start moving people to other things, because these doctors, they're prescribing Oxycontin and different things, and then that can be an on-ramp into other drugs. So we're doing something to support communicating about that, but one of the things you'll hear from Tim Ryan is an extraordinary insight into the underlying challenges below the opioid epidemic. So come and hear what he has to say.
Yeah.
And then there's another amazing practitioner, Dr. Mensa, who's going to talk about nutrient power and the power of nutrients. And there's other amazing people like Frank Shankowitz. He is the founder of Make-A-Wish Foundation. There's a movie being made about his life right now.
Yes,
and
I love Frank.
Very few people know about his mental health challenge that he made it through before starting Make-A-Wish. And his partner actually took, well, you'll hear more of the story there, but you're going to want to hear this story.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have Make-A-Wish Foundation had he not gone through what he had gone through. And so thank God for Frank Shankowitz.
Yes.
And,
oh, wow, that's exciting.
Oh, my goodness. And we've got practitioners coming out that'll be kind of table leaders. And we've got additional folks that are seeking, you know, from a support network. They might have a family member, so come out and learn new, innovative things.
Yes.
We're going to have a good time.
Yeah. So Journey's Dream connects those touched by mental health challenges with programs and resources that support renewed hope and well-being. So that's what this is about, support and resources. This
Absolutely.
This is essential. It's vital. When we're going through mental health challenges and we feel there's no one who understands us, which is part of my personal journey to transformation, recovery and transformation, that was the hardest thing, one of the hardest things, that I didn't feel I had support and resources and holistic support and resources. So that is one of the key components to your mission here. And journeysdream.org. You know, go to the website, check it out, get involved any which way you feel called to.
And people, if they want to volunteer, by the way, Karen, they can volunteer. If they want to donate, they can donate. But I want to share one of our... Imagine putting your zip code in and finding practitioners that believe in this vision of full recovery.
Wow.
So out of let's say there's 100 docs or practitioners in your area, and not just medical doctors and things, but all kinds of practitioners. Imagine putting your zip code in, and the only thing that comes up are the ones that believe in full recovery.
Oh, God.
Imagine the trust that you'd have in that kind of resource.
I'm getting chills here, Mark.
That's
incredible.
That's what was missing when I went through what I went through, because I did Google searches, and I'd get names, and there were directories. It's like, well, I don't know who these people. There's names on a page.
Exactly.
But we're going to create an interactive medium to support people in knowing who these people are, what they believe in, and giving them the access to these resources that exist today, right now.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of search for them. Let's elevate that and illuminate the opportunity, not just for the people who are seeking, but it might actually encourage some of those practitioners that don't currently have that belief system to start to soften what they do believe and see that there are others, there are many out there who are seeing and experiencing their patients, clients, however they want to talk about that, go through full transformation.
Wow, I'm blown away, and I'm just so excited because to have this this community to connect to and feel, that there is a place to go and get what they need, what we need, is beyond extraordinary. And I can't thank you enough, Mark, on behalf of humanity. Woohoo! Let's do the happy dance right now, because I just love how you turned, lemons into lemonade, and took what you went through to create this magnificence for all the other people that can relate. So I just am so thrilled for you and your organization. Any last thoughts, comments, words of wisdom as we're about to wrap it up here? Because we could go all day with this, because it's just so inspiring. Any last?
Yes.
Yeah.
One more thing.
Yes.
Journey's dream is something that we can all step into. And we can help create something on this planet that is this hub of hope. And it's going to take a lot of people. So if you are inspired by this, please contact us.
Yes.
And we can use all the resources that come our way to bring this about. And you might be inspired by, I want to be a part of that. Then come and be a part of it. Or you might be sitting there with, millions of dollars in the bank, wanting to make an impact. Consider that this is a place that your dollars are going to go to work and change millions of lives. So thank you, Karen, and thank you, everyone who's listening. We can all create this by just even blessing it, holding it in our hearts and embracing it in love.
Yes.
That, let's see this as a reality. Let's live into this opportunity to have this vision of a whole planet being healthy, being realized.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. Is there direct contact information you'd like to give out at this moment, or just go right to the website, journeystream.org?
Journeystream.org would be a great place to start.
Okay.
There's there's an info email on there. If you'd like to contact me directly, mark@journeystream.org is my email.
Yeah, MARK at Journeystream.
Journeystream.org.
Yes.
And because I might not recognize your name, just put in there Karen reference, from the show.
Yeah.
And I'll pay attention, to that. I just get a lot of, email communication, so that'll help it stand out.
Yeah, Karen's podcast.
Karen's podcast.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Put that in the subject line. Contact Mark directly, mark@journeysdream.org. Go to the website, journeysdream.org. please support us any way you can. And I love what you said, even energetically, spiritually, putting that vibration out there is support. And then referring someone else. If you can't directly at this time be involved, do you know anyone else who could? You know, just share it, spread the word, and let's do this!
Yeah,
are we ready to rumble? Woo woo! Mark, thank you so much. Just so touched by your story. You're beyond words. Incredible. And I'm running out of words to even acknowledge you, because I don't know what else to say here. But thank you so much for being here with me this morning, taking your precious time to help others listening. We'd love to hear from you. Please contact Mark or myself, Karen Lovely at Gmail. You can hashtag Karen Lovely podcast, hashtag Karen Lovely. Mark, you have any hashtags?
Hashtag Journey's Dream.
Yep. Okay. Yep. And we want to hear from you. Your feedback, questions, anything, concerns, how we can get involved. If you want to contact me directly to get involved in Journey's Dream, do that. Whatever you got to do, we'd love to hear from you. And Mark, will you join us again down the line?
Would love to. Okay,
wonderful. We're looking forward to seeing you in Chicago, physically, emotionally, spiritually, which way that goes. And here is to all of you listening, thank you so much, and wishing you hope, and renewed hope and well-being. And until we meet again, may all your dreams come true. Thank you so much, everybody.